Hi everyone, welcome to Tripp Advisor. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for another Tabletop Tuesday board game review. Today, not so much of a board game, but a little card game called Love Letter. This week here at Tripp Advisor, with Valentine's Day coming up this weekend, and also for those of us in Ontario where I live here, Family Day weekend as well. So it's going to be a love theme all week here, Tabletop Tuesday, Theology Thursday, and Film Friday. So let's take a look at this simple to set up, simple to play game called Love Letter. Let's see it on the table, and then I'll come back up and I'll give my final thoughts. Okay, here's the setup for a Love Letter on the table. It's simply a simple game. It can even fit in your pocket. Comes in this nice velour bag, but you don't need that for the gameplay, so we'll toss that aside. But as far as the contents, it's simply a deck of 16 cards. And these cards on one side, they have a princess. That's because the theme of the game is sort of the narrative behind the game is there has been a medieval princess who is quite distressed. She's locked herself away because of the arrest of her mother. And each player in the game plays 2 to 4 players. We've set up a 4-player game here. Each player assumes the role of a suitor trying to get a love letter delivered to the princess. But how the game works is, it also comes, I should say, with these 4 player aid cards. So you can give one of these cards out if it's your first time playing, or if players aren't familiar with the different roles of the characters on the cards. You can give each player one of those. Also, you're going to get these little tokens. You can just put them aside near the board. And every time a round is completed, whoever has won the round can collect one of those tokens to signify they have 1 point for winning the previous round. You can just keep those aside close to the board. And there's also a simple rule book here. The rule book talks a little bit about the narrative, the backstory, as well as outlining the rules of play and what each character in the game does. Pretty simple game. So this is a typical setup. If we're playing a 4-player game, you'll deal 1 card to each player, and then you'll deal a second card to the player who's starting first. They will get 2 cards in their hand. You'll always discard 1 card out of play, which won't be in the round, so we'll put that aside. And then within reach of all players, you have sort of a draw pile, where after you play a card on your turn, when it's your next turn, you will draw a card at the beginning of your turn. Before we simulate a round, let's just look at all the different roles in the game. In the game, you'll have characters numbering 1 through 8. And so I'm just going to go through each of the characters. And on that little player aid card, it tells you how many of those characters are in the deck and what they do. So on your turn, if it's the player's turn and they have 2 cards to choose from, perhaps 1 or both of their cards might be guards. A guard is a number 1. They are the most plentiful out of the 16 cards. There are 5 guards in the deck. And what the guard does, if you choose to play that card, you will simply pick an opponent of your choosing, and you will guess the character and the number that they have as their 1 card. The only restriction is a guard cannot guess another guard. That's because, unlike all the other numbers in the deck, the guards are much more plentiful. There's 5 of them. So any number other than a guard you can guess. If you correctly guess, the person is eliminated from the round. So let's say I guess that this opponent sitting across from me has a prince. Number 5 is a prince. They simply look at their card and they simply answer yes or no. Well, in this case, the person has a guard, so they would simply say, no, I'm not a prince. And that is the knowledge that the rest of the players can make note of, and they would discard the card that they played. That guard would then be left face up beside the player, signifying the rest of the players know that that guard has already been played. There's only 4 guards remaining in the game. The second character in the game, the number 2, we'll just go up number by number, is the priest. There are 2 priest cards in the deck, And if the active player chooses to play a priest on their turn, they simply pick an opponent and they can look at another player's hand. So they, again, if I wanted to look, let's say if it's this player's turn now and I wanted to look at the player across from me, that player, he or she, would simply secretly show the card to me and would reveal a guard. That would be secret knowledge for me and no one else at the table. And then I would discard that card in front of me after playing. The third number in the deck, number 3, is the Baron. The Baron, a special ability of the Baron, is not looking at another player's hand nor guessing another player's number, but picking an opponent to compare cards. Remember, on your turn, you will draw a card, so you will have 2 cards in your hand. So if one number is the Baron and the other number is a very high number, that's a good time to play a Baron, because when you play a Baron, you simply compare your card with the card of an opponent. So in this case, you know, if the game came all the way back to the person who played the priest, and this person has not yet played their guard, I know they have a low number in their hand, that might be a good opportunity to play the Baron. If you play the Baron, the opponent simply shows you your card, you compare your numbers, and the player with the lowest card is out. Anytime a player is out, either if they've been guessed by a guard or they've lost to a Baron, they simply flip their card over. So in this case, if this person lost the battle with the Baron, they would be out of the round and they would flip their card up, showing the rest of the remaining players what card is now out of play. There are 2 Barons in the deck. The next number, number 4, is the Handmaid. Now, I've been talking about guards and priests and barons being able to choose an opponent to take an action against an opponent. The Handmaid, if you play a Handmaid, you are protected from any and all other cards that could be played against you until your next turn. So if this person played a Handmaid, they would be protected for the next 3 turns. The active players, or 2 turns, if there's 2 players left, they would have to be able to attack or do actions to other players. They would be immune to all activities. It's simply a defensive protection card, and there are 2 Handmaids in the deck as well. Up to the number 5. The number 5 card in the deck is the Prince. If you play the Prince card on your turn, you choose any player, including yourself, to discard his or her card and draw a new card. And so you simply, again, if it was this person's play, and this person has already been eliminated, I could not play against this person because this person has an active Handmaid. So I could either make this person discard, the person to my left discard, or I can choose to discard my card in hand as well to draw a new card. That's what the Prince does. There are 2 of them in the deck as well. And then the last 3 numbers, the number 6, 7, and 8, they're only 1 number of each in the deck. Number 6 is the King. The King card, simply you trade hands with another player of your choice. So you would play the King, and the player you choose to play it on, you would simply swap his or her card with your other card and discard the King card. Of course, the downside to that is the player that you traded with now knows the card that you're left with in hand. However, there are some good opportunities to play the King, as we'll see shortly. And then the remaining 2 cards, the number 7 card is the Countess. If you have this card and your second card is either a King or a Prince, because remember, you're drawing a card at the start of your turn, you will have 2 cards in hand. If you have a Countess with a Prince or a King, you must choose to discard the Countess card. That's all it does. Otherwise, you can hang on to it, you can release it and bluff as if you had a Prince or a King, but if your other card is a Prince or a King accompanying the Countess, you must discard the Countess. Last but not least is the Princess card. The Princess is the highest number, and so in a sense it is the most powerful, because as all of the cards are drawn, and the round will end in one of 2 ways. Either it will end with 3 of the 4 players in a 4-player game being eliminated, either through guards or barons, Or if there's 2 or more players remaining still left in the game when all the cards have been drawn and the draw pile gets down to nothing, then all the remaining players simply flip over their cards. Whoever has the highest number remaining will win. And so obviously the princess is powerful in that regard. But the downside to the princess is if for any reason you discard this card or are forced to discard the princess, you are immediately out of the round. So, of course, if a guard guesses you have the princess, you are out. But also, if a prince is played against you and the person forces you to discard your card, you are also out of the round. And so that's how it works. You simply have 2 cards on your turn. You play one of your cards in hand, follow the instructions, the character ability. Round and round the table you go until either all of the players have been eliminated except for one, or at the end of the round when there are no cards to draw, you flip up the cards. The highest number remaining is the winner of the round. Whoever wins the round gets one of these simple tokens to signify, and you can determine how many rounds you want to play. It's recommended in a 4-player game you play until someone has won 4 rounds. It's a quick game. It takes about 10 to 15, 20 minutes at the most, depending on how many rounds it takes. And that's all there is to it. That is Love Letter. Okay, well that's Love Letter, a pretty simple game to play, and I was a little skeptical of this one, I'm not gonna lie. I heard some good reviews about it. I thought, we'll give it a shot. It only costs about $10. Really is just this velour bag, or there is a box version you can get. But I'm really glad we picked it up. We've got a lot of play with this one, and I call this a breadstick game. My kids love ordering pizza, and there's a new pizza joint not far from our place, and whenever we place an order, Dad, we got to get some breadsticks. They love the main course, but they just love diving into those breadsticks before the main meal. And this is kind of what I call a breadstick game. It's an appetizer game, a filler game. If you want to fill 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe you're looking for a game with your family or friends where you don't want to be committed to a big setup and a long 1 to 2 hour strategy game, plus taking it and putting it back in the box. This one, you can teach it, get it on the table, play it through, and pack it up all in under a half an hour. And you can vary the length of it too. You can play as long as you want. You can say, first 1 to 3 cubes, or 4 cubes, or 5 cubes is the winner. There really is no set amount of time for playing the game. And so let me just give this a little bit of a scorecard. Let's talk about the theme first of all. Let's be honest, it's a card game. You could pretty much play this with a deck of cards, although you'll need 5 aces if you're going to play with the 5 guards. So the nice little backstory, the medieval theme, it's there, but it's kind of pasted on, and it adds a little bit of feel to the game, but it's certainly not the most immersive theme ever. It's okay. So it's probably the weakest part of the game for me. I give it a C. I should mention there is another version of this game using Batman characters. So you could pretty much paste on any theme you want, a medieval theme, a Batman theme. So it's not the most thematic game, but it's all right. I'll give it a C. The aesthetics, you know what? I'm a sucker for stuff like this. You don't even use this when you play, but it's just kind of nice. It comes in this nice sort of velour bag. The artwork on the cards it's nice. It's nice. The components are decent as well. It's not the most bright and aesthetically pleasing game, but it's very good. I give it a B on the aesthetics and the overall look of the game. The replayability, this is where this game really shines. This game hasn't really gotten stale or old for us, whether I'm playing it with friends as part of a longer game night. It might be one game, short game that we start with. Lately, we've just been playing this after dinner with dessert, just pulling it out after dinner for a quick 20 to 30 minutes around the dinner table as a family, and it really doesn't get old. It's a fun little replayable game. You don't have to think too much, but it doesn't get boring. And so I think that's one of the strengths of this game, as its replayability, and I'll give it an A. And the game length, really, it depends on how long you want to play, but for what it is, I wouldn't want this to be a 45, an hour, hour and a half game. It could get a little boring and old with that length of time, but to pull it out, to play it for 15, 20 minutes at a time, it is the perfect game length for what it is. It's a little card game, a social deduction game, good for all ages, and I think the game length is appropriate for what it is, so I'll give it an A as well for the game length. As far as ease of play, I hope my little brief tutorial did it justice. It's really simple to play. You just deal out one card to each person. Always make sure you remove one card at the start of the round. That adds to the little mystery of which card is not in play as you're trying to guess the opponent's cards. And then round and round the table you go. Draw a card. You have 2 cards in hand, the active player. Pick which card you want to play. It says right on the card what that card allows them to do. Also has the little player aid cards, which are good if you're just getting to know the game. If you're a beginner, use those cards. They'll be helpful as well. And so it really is an easy game to play. It's an easy game, and so I'll give it an A, but I want to talk about the tactics and the strategy, because there are some games that are easy to play, but there's absolutely no strategy whatsoever, no tactics, especially with card games. With any card game, there's going to be an element of luck, and it's no different here. Sometimes you'll just guess someone with a lucky guess and get them, or they'll get you, and yeah, that's a bit frustrating at times, but the rounds are so quick that if you do get eliminated right away, you're not sitting out very long. You're sitting out for a couple minutes, and even when you're sitting out, you can kind of get a feel for how the other players play, their strategies and their tactics. So there is some strategy here. It's a little bit like a poker game. There's going to be luck involved, but if you can sort of read the opponents, and if you can kind of see how they play, and if you can make a mental note of the cards that have already been played, that are face up as people get eliminated and play cards, it really is a deduction game. You'll be able to deduce and strategize. And so there are some tactics, there are some strategy, when to play a handmaid to protect yourself, or when to play a countess maybe and bluff and make the other players think you have a prince or a king that forces you to play that countess card. There is a little bit of bluffing, a little bit of strategy involved. It's not the most strategic game, but for a light game like this, there is a little bit of a layer of depth and strategy. So I'll give it a B for the tactics and strategy. So overall, at the end of the day, this is a fine breadstick game, a fine appetizer game. It's a game that gets to the table quite a bit in our household. I'll give it a very good score, a B+. Bottom line, if you're looking for a simple card game that isn't too strenuous to set up or to learn, but still has enough depth to get it to the table time and time again, Love Letter just may be the game for you. I love the fact it's so portable as well. You can literally fit this game in your pocket. You can play it when you're going on a trip. If you're in your car or van and there's a bunch of passengers, you can play it. We've even played this one on trains and in airports, waiting for planes. Love Letter, take a look. I think you'll enjoy this one. Really solid little filler game. Well, that's it. That's a wrap for today. Tabletop Tuesday, TripAdvisor. Thanks, as always, for taking time to be with me. That kicks off our love theme this week. Welcome to come back and join me for my Theology Thursday talk this week, and, of course, my Film Friday film review this Friday. As always, you can subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with others you might think might enjoy this little game. And hey, whatever game you got on your table this week or this weekend, I do hope you have a great time. Have fun, stay safe, and we'll see you next time here at TripAdvisor.